right. I'm not going to spend too much time in the shop here today. I'd like to have a night where I actually get home at a decent time. I've been getting home at 9 quarter after every night this week because I've been chisel plowing. Not that that's super late, but ever since I wrecked my truck, I kind of take not overdoing it a lot more serious than I used to. But anyhow, I got that video of chisel plowing done because I didn't have time to do it last night. And today we had a pretty decent little jag of rain this morning. I'd say somewhere around a 1/4 inch, 2/10 or so. I obviously didn't have a rain gauge out because it's too cold to have a rain gauge out, but it was enough to shut down chisel plowing for a few days. Hopefully, might be able to go again Sunday, if not maybe Monday, because it sounds like we're supposed to be dry again for a while. And then they took we had a bunch of snow forecasted for last week. They took that out, but the forecast is changing daily. So, but anyhow, we'll get back on the applicator here. So we left off working on the new pump mount and everything. So we have to make this pin fit in there. So we're gonna have to bore them to 1.25 inches. So we're gonna have to come back in the lathe. And I don't know. I'm half tempted to just drill it and then ream it, because the drill is obviously going to leave it a little undersized. And I think Dad said we should have an 1.25 inch reamer around here somewhere. What's that? That's a 1 inch. Unless he's got it somewhere else. I'm not seeing a reamer that big. But he said that there was a 1 inch. He said there was a 125 reamer in here. Let me look, see if I can find something. Okay, I found a reamer. It was in a different drawer. And whoever wrote on this what it is had issues. It looks like they wrote 1 inch 552. Well, it's actually 1 inch 252. But man, if that doesn't look like 5.5, of course I can't get it to show up good on the camera, but it looks like a 5.5. But, so I got an 1.25 inch drill. 1.25 inch drill measures 1 inch 249. That's 1 inch 252. So can use the drill, rough cut it, and then ream them to size, and we should be good. Before we go punching a hole all the way through that and wasting a part, just make sure. Yeah, apparently that bit, even though it measures undersize, is drilling oversize. That's why we check. Okay, so go down to 1 3/16 inch drill. Alright, since we drilled them 1 3/16, we're still a little too fat to run a reamer through it because they're not made to hog out that much material. So, got to take a boring bar and shave a little bit more out. I already went in and touched off, so... Alright, so I got it bored to 1" 240, so we're slightly undersized. So now we're good to ream it. And now, our pin almost like it was made for it. Just got to do it 2 more times. Oh, and I gotta chamfer the edges, which that we can do right here. Sweet. Okay, now that the machines are sleeved and everything fits, first thing we got to do, while I still got this mill set up, I had it changed from the other day, we got to drill the center of the cross pin for a 1/4 inch roll pin. And then the 2 outside sleeves got to get drilled for grease zerks. And then the center sleeve has to get drilled for a 1/4 inch roll pin. I honestly didn't think that I was going to be able to do all of these in the same setup, because I didn't figure these would lay in the vise and still hit up against the end stop, but they did, so got lucky on that. I don't want that, I want this. And then it'll never be right. We can get it close to just run a chamfer here on this side. The joy of working with round things. Well, that's pretty darn good for just eyeballing it. And there we have all of our pivot pieces. I left the grease, I mean, they're well in there, but I left the zerks kind of shallow. That way we didn't have any interference issues. And the pinhole lines up. I didn't drive the pin through, but it lines up, so. And to clear the burrs on the inside after drilling, you just take the reamer and you can go through by hand and you can twist them, or twist the burrs off, and away you go. So, with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and get my mess cleaned up and call it a night. And the last thing we should have to do before we weld this thing together, actually there's two things. First, got to drill the holes in the sides of the, or in the edges of the plate, and need to get this pin cut off, and well, first measure the geometry of it the best we can so we can replicate it the best we can, and then cut that pin off and bore a scallop in this so that sleeve fits in there and gets this pin lined up correctly, and then we can go and weld it all together. So we will hopefully should be able to get that knocked out tomorrow, maybe, hopefully. So we will see what happens tomorrow, I guess. Alright, so I worked ahead a little bit on you today just to get the setup done and out of the way. We're ready to punch the holes in the legs on this plate. Measuring off the old one, we are 6 inches off the back and an inch and 1/8 to center off the bottom, so 7/8 of an inch down off the side of the legs. So since we're measuring off of here, unfortunately gonna have to do 2 different setups, because obviously we don't have a damn, there's nothing we can do in this Bridgeport that can go 9 inches. We just ain't got enough throat, stroke, nothing. So I'm gonna have to work both sides. So I'm gonna have to drill this side, take it out, flip it over, re-zero. I'll be able to use my end stop, so I won't have to re-zero off the end. I'll have to flip it over and re-zero, because now the leg will be in a different spot. And then we can go. So I'm already at 6 inches and 875. And I had to put the tall jaws in the vise. This thing's so tall, I don't got a good place to set you. I guess you can kind of go there, maybe. And let's step that up to go here. Holes are just going to get drilled with an 1.25 drill so that the pin slides through. They don't need to be, because they're just drilled for clearance. So we don't got to worry about boring them or making them perfect or anything. Basically, the only thing we got to worry about is that they are in line enough that the pin will slide through. Now, which one of these was 1.25? That one. Sharpened at whatever Chinese sweatshop they were made in, because every single one of them only cuts off of one side. They weren't sharpened square, flat, nothing. They just... Now, hopefully, the pin will go through that hole. So much stuff. Oh yeah. Does which does this feel like in there? There must be a burr hung up, so unfortunately I cannot run the reamer in the mill because it's too tall. We can't get the plate in there, get the reamer in, and have the knee far enough down to make it all work. But what we can do, because there's not going to be a whole lot there, is you just take you a pair of vice grips. And we want to go this way. There we go. Now as long as we can get it to go through this hole and through that hole, we should be good. And she fits just beautiful. So the last thing I got to do on this piece is obviously we need, because the roll pin on this is going to have to go straight up and down. So obviously gonna need a way to drive it out, so I need to punch an access hole, just like a 5/8 or something. Probably doesn't even have to be that big, but that's probably how big I'm gonna make it, right here in the center. That way we got something that if for some reason this pin ever has to come out, we need to drive the roll pin out through the hole. So I'll do that real quick. Okay, so this is all assembled, and I was fiddling with it just to see what I like, and I think I'm actually going to take those grease zerks and point them this way. That way, you know, you leave them that way, they're hanging down below. This way they're protected. Nothing can really get to them, so they don't get white. Not that applicating corn anything should, but just in case, leave them that way. That way they're inside a hole and protected. So that all fits together nicely. The next thing we got to do is hog out a scallop in this so that this will fit and still have the pin on center. So I can use an annular cutter to start it, because the OD on that pipe's a goofy size. It's not quite 1 7/8", and we don't have an 1 7/8 annular cutter anyhow. Why was I walking over here? I don't remember why I was walking over here. So can use this annular cutter to hog out the big chunk of the meat, and then take a boring bar and finish it out to size so that the sleeve fits in there nice and snug and gives you a good something good to weld on. The only thing I wish I'd have done is I wish I'd have made these a little narrower and this a little wider, because right now it's just a tick over 2.5, so it's just because for some reason I had it in my mind this was 2x2 box, not 2.5 by 2.5. So welding the outside of it, I mean, I'll have plenty of meat to lay good heavy bead here and here, just won't be able to do much on the outside, but that shouldn't be a big issue anyhow. So with that being said, unfortunately this thing is not deep enough to get all the way. I mean, I can get all the way through just no problem, except for I was hoping to be able to just take it and hog out with this in place, but she ain't got enough gullet to break through without running into the top of this, so I'm gonna have to cut that out with a grinder, which ain't gonna be fun because them welds are pretty thick. So let me just get this cut out and get set up in the vise, because setting this up in the mill ain't gonna be that fun either, because I don't have a whole lot to get a hold of and still be able to get to it. So let me get things set up here and then we'll be right back. Alright, it's a little bit of kind of a little interesting setup, but this is basically what you have to do because everything's already assembled. So got it as much in the vise here as I can, and then out here I got shims, and I shimmed it until it was level with, or parallel with the table. So, and they were real pricks on that pin. they put the pin on first, so there was actually weld down in here behind the plate, and then they welded the plate on top of that weld, so you can't get to the weld to get the pin off. So I ground as much off as I could and topped it. That way hopefully we can get enough clearance to get the cutter through. Annular cutters are fun. They're everything that a hole saw wishes it could be.
And they're a lot more accurate because you don't get the wobble like you do with a hole saw.
Oh, dang it. I need that little bit of nubbin on top going because I think I'm sitting on it. Maybe. Yep, I'm sitting on it. Alright, hang on a second. Okay, hopefully I got enough of the nubbin ground off that we can get through the rest of this. Didn't have far to go. There we go. Yep, there was a bead of weld all the way down the back of that with no way to get to it. So now I can set up a boring head real quick, and we got to take off like another 1/16 of an inch or so to get it where the sleeve will slide through there. Alright, I got a boring head set up. I touched off, so we're zeroed. So I gotta work backwards because we're pulling. Right? No, I gotta push. And basic, since I don't have a way to get in there with a caliper, and since it's obviously not a complete hole, I've only got a half moon, just kind of got to sneak up on it until this puck slides in it. go some more. Well, it took a lot of little baby bites, but I didn't really want to take many big bites because of the way that thing's entering and exiting the work so much. Because, you know, in, out, in, out, in, out, in, out, and that is a carbide insert, so it's tough, but they're brittle and they don't like knocking, so. But we got a nice snug fit around there, so I think we're good. So the last thing I got to do on this is figure out, same thing, an access point for the roll pin. Figure out where up here, because that's where up here is going to be determined by how flat it'll lay in there and the angle I got to put over. So I got to figure that out. Punch a hole in the top of the box tube for a roll pin, and then this will be done, and we can start welding and hopefully get some paint and primer on this yet tonight. Alright, everything is set to weld. Got a hole in there. Luckily, the way everything lays out here, once you back the spring tension off, that thing will lay dead flat, so you can just keep everything right in line as far as the holes go. I cut 2 little pieces of 1/4-inch flat stock to lay under here to take up the gap, so I got a spot to lay weld in. Basically all they're there for is filler to hold the weld up, and the weld will do the rest. And I'm gonna set a block here, and that pretty much holds the grease zerk level. That way I get them both welded in the same orientation, just because OCD. And yeah, should be ready to buzz everything in. Alright, everything went together okay. The pin's got a little bit of a tight spot in it. I'm hoping Dad has stones for this little baby hone, because it will go small enough to hone that hole. And actually it'd be nice to hone all three of them and get the bark marks out from the reamer. That way there's nothing to gall. But anyhow, everything, I mean, we're all good here. So there's one more thing that I have to do that I forgot about, so I can't get it painted yet tonight. On the top side, you know, this, flip this thing over here. Up here, in all four corners, we're going to put set screws facing the toolbar. Since this is going off the front, we're going to be pushing it. There will be enough slop in the U-bolts, just by their nature, that if you're going along and you notice the tire skewed off to one side or something, it's kicking a little roost of dirt, put set screws in it. That way you can steer the plate and lock it down. That way you can get the tire running true, especially since we're pushing it. It's not such a big deal when you're dragging, but when you're pushing, it starts to become a pretty big deal. So, but I have to do that, so I'll do that tomorrow morning. But anyhow, I want to get my mess cleaned up and get things put away and get home, because it's 8 o'clock and I'm tired and hungry. So, I guess we'll catch you guys in the morning. Alright. Been cutting steel, coming up with an idea for what I want to do for my jack screws, and basically I came up with, I got a piece of 1/2 by 2.5 that's going to hang down over the lip a 1/2 inch in the front. And it's going to be drilled for two 1/2 inch set screws, and then in the back, obviously you can't do that because you're going to be clear the heck back here. So I got a piece of 1/2 by 2 that's going to sit on top, so they'll both be the same height, and we'll lay some gussets on it so that it can't rock back. This one shouldn't really need to do that because you're going to be down over the edge, so the edge is going to act like your lever. So that's what we got going on. I'm already set up in the vise. We can machine both pieces in the same setup, because in both cases I'm going to be over 3/4 and down 1/2, so the height doesn't matter, because the tail on the 2.5 will end up down here. And we can do it by foot, so basically I can use one setup for all 4 holes on every operation. So alright, and these we can go ahead and power tap, because they're just straight through. Alright, holes are drilled, everything's ready to weld up. So that's what we're gonna do. This particular piece might not weld all that great because it was kind of a little pitted. It was, I don't even remember where the heck this came from. I think I took it off of a plow or something I was taking apart. There's no good way to get in there to clamp it. Too terrible. Well, that's the damnedest thing I ever seen. Weld the bushings in it yesterday. Had to do a little finagling, ream it, and everything to make sure the pin still fit, and the pin fit, but it fit tight. Weld those on. It straightened itself back out. I'll be damned. So there, this side the welds got a little ugly because that metal was so, well, this is what it was. I mean, it's past rust. It's pitted rust. Without sandblasting it, you weren't going to clean it up much better. I ground it the best I could, or sanded it the best I could, but it still has rust pits, and that was causing some issues. I mean, they don't look terrible, they just don't look great. If I got in there, if I could get in there to clean the rest of the BBs out, they'd look better. But it's stuck. All it's got to do is keep it from doing this, so. But I guess I was going to throw the pin in the lathe and skim it a little bit, but as long as it stays like that, I don't think I'm worried about it. Funny how that works out. So this stuff should be pretty much done. Let me see if I can clean some more of them BBs out. That's bugging me. Alright. I'll let that cool down before I throw any paint on it. The last thing we have to do, as far as the pump mount drive, everything goes, is this dog leg has to come out of it. Because with the room we have on the toolbar, that's got to get mounted offset to one side of the row. So if we take the dog leg out of it, it will actually move the wheel over and put it back in the center of the row, because that's going to be offset to one side, basically the same amount as this dog leg. Because right now this puts it back in line with the bracket. We want it off to one side of the bracket. So this has got to get cut off. And screwed up as them holes are, we might just make a different tube. But I also want to see if I can get that toolbar stuffed in here. That way we could get that on it for a minute and see where everything's going to land. But either way, this has got to get cut apart, so I got to figure out how to get this in the saw so that we can do that. Alright, that's all cut off. I didn't get any video of it because I had to hold it in the saw by hand, because trying to cut stuff that's shaped like this doesn't really work that great. But we got it. So before we go making any final decisions on this guy, I'm going to figure out how to get that toolbar shoved in here, because it should fit. I measured it out. And I don't want to work on it outside, because frankly it's kind of not very pleasant outside. It's cold and windy, and we had a little dusting of snow. So if I can get it inside, work on it where it's warm, I'm going to try to get it inside and work on it where it's warm. Well, I tell you what, getting this thing in here is a chore, but we got her done. Had to throw a bunch of extra weights on the forklift. I mean, it ain't like this thing weighs squat. If there's 2,000 pounds here, I'd be impressed. Problem is, it's 2,000 pounds, 20 foot long. But anyhow, so obviously this is not how this is going to go, but it's the easiest way to visualize where the wheel's going to land. And if we leave it right there, That coulter's a little wonky. I think the shank it's on has got a little bit of an ink going to it, but if we just make this a straight right off the back, and it'll put the tire right back in the center of the row, even though the the mounting bracket's offset to one side. So, and it'll put the pump basically right in line with the edge of the toolbar. Just looks like maybe 2-3 inches outside the edge of the toolbar, so the pump mount will be the widest point, but we could probably sneak it that way just a hair and get it right in line with the end of the toolbar. So what we can do now is we'll probably have to throw the tire back on real quick, because if we can shorten this up some, that would also be better. So let me get things back off of there and get the tire mounted back on there temporarily and see what we can come up with. Alright, so here's what I got mocked up. Basically, when the pump's on there, the pump's basically 18 inches long. So roughly, and that's overall from the flange to the back of the pump. So right about there. So I probably want to be a touch further away than what I am now. And right now I need to add about 4.5 inches onto the tube if I was to put it here. So I think if I add 3 more inches, so that puts me at 18, basically at 12, so that would move that ahead 3 inches. I think that would be plenty. And this is basically as high where the bracket is. It will never be all the way up in the hole, so this for the most part is probably damn near as high as it'll ever be. So I think that would be plenty, and it'll still end up shorter than what it was, because before I cut about 1 inch off of this already, so it would have been out here and then over here and then that big old tail, so we're already losing a fair bit of, it's already getting shorter. So figure out what I can use for tube, and we'll get this modified. Alright, so this is what we got. Unfortunately, we did not have any new box tube around that matched this dimensionally. And unfortunately, twice, this is measures 2 1/8 ID. If you want to call it diameter on a square, whatever you want to call that in your dimension. So you can't slip a piece of 2-inch box tube in there to sleeve it. So in lieu of being able to do that, I cut some 2-inch flat stock and put a few 5/8 holes in each side, and there's another, we'll weld this piece in here. That way we can slide them together. But basically just have this flat stock in here bridging the butt weld to take some strain off of the weld itself. Is basically the goal there. And then we can butt weld it. I'm welding these holes shut, and we are making brand new holes because these are all wallered out. But other than that, that's basically what we got. I'm just going to leave that tacked. That way nothing flexes. I will get this other one welded in this side. I got to put it in this side because with this one in the way I can't get a clamp in here. Alright, now we gotta let that cool down for a minute so it's easier to handle. And then we can get it up in the mill. Obviously I had to take the grinder and grind the two outside welds off flush because they gotta fit in there. But the other ones we can leave the way they are. And there's the plug welds from the holes that got filled. So the other thing I'm gonna do to this, because of the design change, but I can't do it until we get the holes punched in and get it in there, is I'm gonna add another block on top of here so that we're actually catching a second set of holes in here to take some of the torque out of it. And obviously the way the holes in that thing were all wiped out, it wouldn't hurt to catch two bolt holes in this anyhow. So trying to figure out if those are 3/8 or 1/2 inch. If they're 3/8, they're way too damn small for what they're doing, but I'll go grab some bolts and try them, and actually I can just grab a drill bit. But anyway, let that cool down for a minute so I can get it in the mill, and we'll punch some holes in it, and we'll be almost done with this part. Well, that was fun. But we're ready to drill some holes. Smashed my finger with a magnet. So and I'm going to drill these on size so that there's as little slop as possible, because the holes in the bracket are already sloppy. Go down to 8 5/8. Well, I think we can get away without having to add any pieces in there, because once you tighten that up, that's going to be plenty snug, and I guess we'll just have to keep an eye on it and make sure, or just see how it acts, and if it needs it, we can add them later, but I don't think it's going to be necessary. Big thing will be keeping the bolts just obviously make sure the bolts stay tight, because when I took it all apart on the original toolbar I got all this on, they were loose and half wore through. So just got to make sure the bolts don't get loose, which ain't that hard to do. So, but I still have to get this back apart and get some paint and primer on stuff and clean up my mess, because I have one heck of a mess going from between yesterday and today. So I think we're going to go ahead and call it here, because this video is probably got to be over an hour long by now. So I guess we will tomorrow probably start. I can get my visit gauge mount put on. We can get the knives put on, and can probably start running hose. I'm going to go tonight. We're going out to dinner tonight, so I'll run the Royal King and get the big hose and fittings and valves and stuff I need to run the main lines to the pump off the hitch and all that. And I mean, really there ain't a whole lot of plumbing, and then basically once the fertilizer stuff's plumbed up, it'll be down to getting the cylinder, or getting a set of cylinders for it, and plumbing the hydraulics up. But the toolbar will be pretty much done, so probably another day or a little over. I won't have the hydraulics done tomorrow, but before the end of this week, the toolbar will be done. We can start on the cart, and hopefully we can get the cart done before the end of the month and move on to other projects. That's kind of where I'd like to be. So, that's it for this one. I'll catch you guys on the next one.